poker's legendary champions, next-generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson.
Welcome, my friend, to another episode of the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast. As always, this is your host, the founder of ChasingPokerGreatness.com, Coach Brad Wilson. And today's guest on CPG, Mike Noori, just took down event number 30, the $1,500 Monster Stack at this year's Fall WSOP for a tidy $610,000. Hilariously, Mike pushed back our conversation twice in the days leading up to our time together because his deep run in the Monster Stack just kept right on rolling day after day after day. Who says the CPG run good isn't the real deal? If you're not familiar with Mike, he's a longtime high-stakes mixed game crusher, and this will be his second appearance on the show. So if you love what you hear, and I can't imagine you not, be sure to check out the back catalog after you're done with this show to learn more about Mike's poker origin story. And now, without any further ado, I bring to you brand new WSOP Bracelet winner, longtime poker pro, and high-stakes mixed game beast, Mike Noori. Mr. Noori, welcome back to Chasing Poker Greatness, sir. How you been?
Good. Thanks for having me back, Brad.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. The first question that I ask is, what have you been up to since round one? Let's catch up.
Let's see. Played a lot of poker, whether it's been online or live, and I've been playing a decent amount in Vegas, cash game wise. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the World Series started, and I won a bracelet, so that was really fun and pretty awesome.
That was okay. Yeah.
So just kind of been playing poker and doing the same thing, but the results have been pretty good lately. So
that's good. Always nice to be on an upswing.
Yeah.
How are the cash games out there at the WSOP this year?
Cash games are very good. I've been kind of focusing more on tournaments since the World Series started, but I was out here. I've been, I got out here 2 weeks early so that I could play just cash games before, because I knew I was going to want to play a lot of tournaments. So those 2 weeks before, the games were really good. And when I've been out of tournaments, I've gone and played some high stakes mixed games, and I've been doing okay at that. So
what are high stakes in the mixed game world?
Anywhere from 3 and 600, and I've played a couple 6 and 1200 sessions. So
nice.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good time. What's the expected swing on a 600, 1200 mixed game session?
Probably like plus or minus like 50, 60K, roughly, depending on how crazy the game is. Obviously, it can be more, but that's probably about average for those stakes.
Good approximation.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Let's dive into the bracelet. We're not just gonna have it as a bullet point. Let's talk about how it went down, your tournament slate that you prepared to play, all your plans.
Yeah, so basically I kind of was just in the next tournament up mode, basically. Like, it didn't matter what the game was, and I just kind of would just take day by day and just be like, okay, this is the next tournament there. Like, I don't mind late regging stuff or even like max late regging tournaments. So I just kind of would just be next tournament up. I wasn't playing 2 tournaments at the same time ever, but I would, whatever tournament I was in, I would just focus on that tournament. And then once I was out of that tournament, just see what was next and figure out what I wanted to enter and go from there. So with the Monster Stack, I originally had played, it's a pretty funny story actually, I was playing the 1500 deuce to 7 no limit tournament first. Like, I was considering playing the Monster Stack like either the next day or not at all, depending on how I did in these smaller mixed tournaments, because I think my edge in the smaller mixed tournaments is bigger than the large field no limit tournaments. So I played I busted and I re-entered this small 1500 no limit single draw tournament right away. Both bullets I was out right away. But that tournament started at 3 p.m. I started late. There was an hour left of the Monster Stack registration, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go play this for an hour and a half on day one, and then I could have tomorrow off to play cash games or play golf or whatever. So like that sounded appealing to me. So I was like, okay, I wasn't even planning on playing this tournament because that tournament started at 10 a.m. and the other event started at 3 p.m. So like I didn't even have, it wasn't even a consideration to play.
Yeah. You just happen to like snap bust out 2 bullets and be available to play.
Correct. And it was like right after dinner break, and they left registration open longer than they normally do in the events that start at 10 a.m. Normally they cut them off at dinner, but this one they cut off at like 8 p.m. if I recall correctly. So went, bought in, and this is a freeze out event, so I couldn't even play tomorrow if I wanted to play the following day. So this was my only shot at it. So you sit down with 50K starting chips, and I bagged, I believe, 220K on day one, which was good stack. And then
how many blinds did you sit down with nearing the end of late reg?
I sat down with 50K at 800, 1600. So just over 30 blinds.
Gotcha. Not super deep. And I guess you played 2 hours, right?
Yeah, roughly about 2 hours. I played about 2 levels.
So we 4X'd in 2 levels. We ran good. We did good.
Yeah.
So you didn't get your day of golfing. You had to come back for day 2 of the Monster Stack.
Well, no, I had Saturday off. I think I played golf that day, but I don't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I played golf that day. So had Saturday off. Sunday, the restart was at 10 a.m., which is during football, and I like watching football, and I'm in a lot of like different football gambling pools and all of that. So I enjoy watching football on Sundays, but this tournament started at 10 a.m. on Sunday, which is right when the West Coast football games kick off. So watching them kind of on the big screen and not, a little bit in autopilot, not 100% focus during that time. There's still a ton of people left in this tournament. I'm just, kind of still expecting to be, just on to the next tournament, because
expecting to bust relatively soon, right?
Well, not that I was expecting to bust, because I'm always trying my hardest, but I was just, it's more of a feeling of there's always something else to play. So it's like you can't be too hard on yourself if you get knocked out, because there's always the next something else up or something else to play or whatever. Sure. Like during this 2 months, it's like very poker focused. So, but I was watching a little bit of football, and, I would say I was not 100% dialed in, where in the later stages, I could definitely tell the difference between, being, dialed in and like kind of paying attention and, watching what people's tendencies are and kind of picking up on that stuff, because that's really important in tournament poker. Like at the final table, I could tell you basically like give you like a nice little rundown on each player, even though some of them I only played with at the final table, and maybe for only a short period of time. But, I could, right now I could be like, okay, this player does this, this, and this in this spots. Like I can take advantage of him in these certain spots.
What do you, so it makes sense, there's more risk and more on the line as you get closer to the finish line. And so you're giving it more focus, more energy. What do you look for when profiling villains that you're playing against as it relates to like data points? Like what are you looking for so that you can potentially exploit down the road if you get an opportunity?
Yeah. I mean, it's more paying attention to like certain lines that they take with certain hands and how I would do something different than that. And then looking at how they play certain hands and then seeing what I can do to exploit their normal pattern with their normal hands. So
we don't have to We don't have to give any names or anything, but just
Yeah.
let's dive into like a practical example.
Right. So yeah, I got it. Here's like a couple basic ones. Like at the final table, anytime this one player would be dealt ace king, he would just, if it didn't matter if he had 20 or 30 blinds or even 35 blinds, he would just go all in at the final table because he was afraid to play that hand. So like knowing that, you know, it makes me have play hands. It's very easy to play against that particular strategy. Or there was another player that was really good, but I only saw him limp huge hands. So he's limping aces, ace king, and kings. And so being able to know that, you know, his range is really strong with doing that. I mean, he only turned over those hands, so I don't really know if he was doing that with weaker hands too, but all the hands that I got shown were huge hands and he coolered everybody when that happened. So, you know,
Yeah, it's double pronged, right? Like when player jams ace king
right.
with 20 or 30 bigs, when they just raise, it informs us about what they're just raising with, right? And
Right.
it removes ace king from their raising range. And then if this same villain is like limping aces, kings, ace
No,
king,
this is a different villain. Sorry.
right? Yeah, a different villain is limping aces, kings, ace, king. Then when they open, that informs our three betting strategy because if their plan is to limp the big hands when they do open, it weakens their opening range. So
Correct. So we can jam over the top wider.
Exactly.
And that's what I ended up doing. And basically the most crucial hand at the final table. I mean, everybody was kind of pretty shallow at the final table. One player four-handed had like 70% of the chips in play. So it was an interesting dynamic. And most of the final table was, you know, not more than a 20 big average. So one of the crucial hands was this guy that I was talking about that was jamming ace king was definitely a inexperienced player and had never been in this situation before. Actually, with like 50 left, I got all in ace king versus his ace 10. He was at risk. I wasn't at risk. And he rivered a king for Broadway for a 3-outer to double up and survive and to get to this point. But so he opened the button for 2.2x, and I was in the big blind with sevens. So I rejammed, and he had a covering stack, and he had been doing a little bit of raise folding. And, you know, obviously he would have been jamming ace king and maybe even ace queen here. Probably, I don't know. He might have opened ace queen, but for sure he would have jammed ace king. So I rejammed. He had two jacks, unfortunately, and I drilled a 7 right on the flop. So that's kind of how tournaments go, and that's
very skillful, very skillful of you.
Right.
Very just beaking the 7 on the flop, right? This tournament poker, right?
Yes.
Every one of those that we get are the ones that we need, and that was certainly the one that you needed. You mentioned somebody had 70% of the chips in play. I'm assuming that someone was not you because you didn't say it was you.
No, I did not. So, I mean, there was four-handed was a very interesting dynamic. And luckily right away, I had a similar stack to another player and he jammed the button. The big stack folded. I had 2 10s. I called. He had ace deuce. We held. So that kind of, you know, prevented the big stack from putting a ton of ICM pressure on us and forcing us to just fold down to nothing, trying to ladder. And
that would have been painful if the big stack. I mean, they're just going to shove every single chance they get as they rightfully should.
Basically, right, and they rightfully should until one of us or two of us double. So just because we're forced to fold so much in that spot. So I was very lucky, like very early on in that situation, to double up and be able to counteract him. And then, so then 3-handed, I made probably the decision that I regret the most. It worked out. I got lucky, but the short stack who had 6.5 blinds shove the button, and I have about 25-ish big blinds, maybe a little bit more. I think we're still at 1.2. Yeah, somewhere about there. And I had Jack 7 of diamonds in the big blind, and I called his 6 to 7 blind shove, which I did before the night of the final table. Definitely look at, shoving and calling ranges for 6 to 15 blind situations, like button versus big blind, cutoff versus big blind, and situations like that, because I hadn't really looked into that in a while. So I did go and review some of that stuff. So that helped. I think this one was probably a fold, but in game it felt close, and taking that shot to get heads up, I kind of thought that was okay in the moment, and being able to get heads up with a decent stack. I mean, I was still even if I won this hand, I was still 2-1. I would still would have been at a 2-1 chip deficit. So
how bad is the call ICM wise, like looking back on it afterwards? Because like I'm not a tournament player, and it seems pretty close to me to remove ICM pressure to bust out the short stack. But again, I'm very unstudied as it relates to like in-game MTTs.
It definitely was slightly negative. I can't put into, I haven't done the exact calculation to see how negative it was.
Yeah.
But I think it was basically pretty close to neutral overall. I haven't looked at it. That was more from just talking with my friends and all of that. So it was more that than me like actually looking back and seeing
what were their opinions on it?
Fold.
Pretty cut and dry. Just fold.
Yeah, right.
Why is it such a clear fold for them? I assume they're like high level MTT guys, right?
Right. Yeah. These guys play way more tournaments than I do, and I value and trust their opinion. Just because doubling him up increases my chances of getting third. Where if I, am jamming on him, or let the big stack jam on him with his small stack, he's forced to pick up a hand, and I get heads up way more often than calling in basically a marginal EV spot. Because it was close. It wasn't like, it was more like I would call Jack 9 suited instead of Jack 7 suited. So it's like 1 or 2 pips off on what was close.
Yeah. 2 pips off from what was close. So, right. I mean, I understand that thought process. It doesn't make sense. Three-handed, folding, letting the big stack put the short stack at risk so that, you can ladder up at no risk or minimal risk. And I guess once the short stack doubles up from the big stack, then you're taking more chances.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. That's the MTT strats for this podcast episode, ladies and gentlemen. Very rare occurrence.
Yeah.
So I assume the Jack 7, you win.
I do.
You win the Jack 7.
He flips over Jack 10, and I drill a 7.
Yeah, this 7s. 7s are easy.
Yeah, and I'll get to the final hand too, and there's another 7 in there.
All right, let's keep going. So like you bust a short stack, which takes you to like 30 bigs or so. What was the percentage of chips that you had in play there?
So there's 176 million in play. He had roughly 110 million, and so 115, and I had about 60.
So 2-1, pretty much.
2-1. Yeah, he basically had me 2-1. Couple hands in, he raises. I call 5-6 off. Flop comes 8-7-3, rainbow, and I check. He bets 4 million, which is about little under half pot because of the big blind ante makes it play a lot bigger heads up. I call turn 4. I check. He bets 11 million. I jam. He calls. He has 8-7. So pretty bit cooler heads up.
Yeah. Not a great situation for him.
Right. So get the double. Now I'm 2-1. We play a bunch of small pots. And kind of just go back and forth. I chip away slowly, so I have a little bit more than 2-1 lead. Basically, my strategy heads up was min raise a lot of buttons because of the big blind ante play makes it play so much bigger. So I want him to make mistakes where he's overfolding in that situation, to getting a really good price and basically playing more pots in position. Because if I
heads up,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Heads up with the big blind ante. I mean, facing a min raise. So what are the blinds? What is the big blind ante? Like, what's the price that the big blind gets to defend?
Right. So we are playing 800,000, 1.6 million, which should probably never play those blinds again.
Yeah.
In a tournament, or ever, I guess. So I would make it 3.2 million, and there's 3.2 dead already. So he's getting 4-1.
Okay. Which basically means you can't really fold anything pre-flop.
Correct. Right. So, I mean, he definitely was folding some more than, I would say, at least more than the bottom 5%, probably. But it was such a short heads up match. It's really hard to extrapolate.
Well, if they folded at all, then they're folding some percentage that's greater than 0.
Exactly.
Right.
Right. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But to know exactly whether he was folding the bottom 3, bottom 5, bottom 10, I couldn't really tell you that. But,
do you know proper defense strategy there for the big blind?
Off the top of my head, no. I mean, it was all, just intuition and, like just experience from playing different poker games and being in different situations, playing heads up cash poker.
I mean, mixed games plays a role too. I mean, just in like, I think sometimes the pot odds model is harder for no limit players to wrap their mind around.
Right.
But like for limit players, very easy for y'all to wrap your mind around the pot odds model of like getting 4-1 and realizing that like, if we're looking purely at raw equity, there's no hand against any range that has less than 20% raw equity.
Right. Correct. Exactly.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So chipping away didn't last long. Tell me about the conclusion.
Okay. So last hand, he limps the button. I make it 4 million with queens in the big blind. So 2.5x. Want to keep his hands in there. Don't want to go too big. And he had limped a couple of times and I had checked most of the time. So I didn't want to, do something crazy out of the ordinary. And I'd be doing that with a decent range of hands. Suited Broadways, suited aces, ace probably 10 plus, something like that. And basically probably like 7s plus too, I would imagine. So I make it 4 million. He calls. Flop is 10-6-4, 2 hearts and a club. I continuation for 4 million into 9.6. He calls. There's 13.6 million in there. He has roughly 45 million behind. It's plus or minus. He's got probably about 40 million behind. Yeah, 40 is correct. Turn is the 7 of clubs, which puts a backdoor flush draw out there. So now there's 2 flush draws out there. He's going to have a lot of, pair plus straight draws, pair plus flush draws.
5-7, 7-8, 7-9.
Yes, all those hands are, especially with me, with him limping and me raising, like this board is like, pretty heavily weighted towards, his range, more so than mine. Like I'm going to have a lot of high cards in this situation.
Sure.
So but I'm still at the top of my range with queens in this situation. So I size up and I bet 11 million, basically trying to charge draws and one pair hands.
Yeah, get value from top pair. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So because he's going to have a bunch of stuff like that. So he goes and he jams, and I call pretty quickly. So he jams about 30 million more, and I call. He's got king 8 of clubs. So he has all the outs. He has double gutter, flush draw, and an overcard. And, they pause for dramatic effect, and they rip over the 7 of hearts. And I win.
Boom.
So, yeah, that felt really nice, but there's another 7 for you.
There's 2 7s, actually.
Right, yeah.
Multiple 7s.
Right.
How did you feel winning your bracelet? And is that your first bracelet?
That was my first bracelet. It was the first time I was heads up even. So it felt really good, especially in that type of field to win. Because I would have laid a huge price that I would have won my first bracelet in no limit hold'em. So definitely unexpected. It felt very surreal. Like it took a while for it to like sink in me and like appreciate what I did, because like in the moment I was like, wow, like, yeah, I played really well and all of that, but I got insanely lucky. I lost a big flip with 14 left, and I was down to 1.5 blinds with 14 left. So it's like just the whole thing, and then getting in 7s versus jacks. And like, I look back at like all the hands that I got lucky on, but then there's hands you get unlucky on. So I don't know. It's hard to like conceptualize in tournament poker, because like in cash game poker, when you play well, you're going to get rewarded in the long term. Like, if you keep putting yourself in plus EV spots, and, if you keep putting yourself in 60% spots, you're going to turn a profit, a vast majority of the time. Like, yeah, there's going to be where you're crazy outliers and standard deviations where you're, 1, 2, or 3 standard deviations from the mean. But the vast majority of the time, when you are playing against weaker opponents in a cash game, you're going to win. So like in tournaments,
you're most certainly going to win over the course of your life, right?
Right, exactly.
Maybe not that session or the next 5 sessions
or even that year,
the next 10 or that year, right? But over the course of your life, you're almost certainly going to win.
Correct. That's exactly what I was talking about.
Yeah. But tournaments, on the other hand,
no tournament, like live tournaments, like you're never going to reach the long term in those. Like I could have just, like, I've been in similar spots during the World Series where I just got 11th, and like nobody remembers like I don't even remember 11th, but like
yeah.
Like I've gotten a bunch of like 8th to 13th, and I was just like, oh shit, like, well, I'm just gonna do it again. I'm just gonna finish 12th, and like
the variance in those big field
insane.
Tournaments is obscene. Like just obscene.
Insane. Right. Totally insane.
Well, you're not going to give it back.
No,
you're not giving it back. Not. And you won the ones that you needed to win. And I think really whenever human beings take down big field tournaments, they're like, you just have to run good. You have to,
right, of course.
You have to run good in the critical moments. You just can't overcome that. 1.5 BBs though. What were you thinking when you're down to 1.5 BBs?
Fuck. Like to play that many days, like this was on day 4, and of, we're playing 10, 12-hour days every day. And like, I'm like, this is gonna, I'm still in it, which was nice, especially the way that I got down to 1.5 bigs was I got all in 9s versus ace queen for a ton of chips, and the board came clean, and then it was river queen. And so like, that was like really demoralizing to lose it that way.
Yeah.
But I was just like, look, I'm going to fight, and I'm going to just keep doing what I'm doing. I'm not out yet. And it only takes a couple of hands to go my way, and then I'm right back in it. And that's kind of what happened. So
yeah, I think people underestimate how a chip stack can grow exponentially quite quickly.
Especially with big blind handing. Like, luckily I wasn't the big blind next hand, because if I was the big blind next hand, then I would only be getting, I wouldn't even be doubling up. because I would be getting, because I'd have to put in 500K, and then I can only win 250 times however many people are in the pot. So if 3 people are in the pot, I can only double up. So if 2 people are in the pot, I'm only winning 1.25 million. But when I get to shove 750, there's 500K already dead, and then I can get, let's say the big blind. Well, a guy rejammed right next to me the next hand.
Nice.
So
yeah,
right. So I got my 750 plus his 750 plus 750 from the blinds plus 500 from the middle. So I was instantly up to 2.75 million when I won that hand, which was, 5.5 bigs. So getting a really good price on
going all in the dark.
Right. I mean, I had ace-4, so it was way above average. But yeah, I mean, I had to pick a hand before my big blind to go in, and the sooner that I did that, the more chance that somebody was going to rejam and isolate, because obviously they're getting such a great price on it too.
Yeah.
To isolate and just make it 4 bigs or even.
The decision to enter a hand is fundamental to poker strategy. Too tight, and they know what you have. Too loose, and you're easy to run over. Pre-flop Bootcamp from Chasing Poker Greatness is a comprehensive guide to locking down your pre-flop game and creating true range advantage. 8 days of guided training, over 60 optimal ranges, and access to a dedicated community of players that will push your pre-flop game from a place of weakness to your greatest strength. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com/bootcamp. Available now.
John, I wanted to ask you why you decided to invest into pre-flop bootcamp.
Everything that you had done with me to that point, or I had heard you do, had impressed me. I loved the podcast. I accidentally ended up in the Poker Power Hour and loved that. And then I took coaching, and then you recommended the boot camp. And at first I didn't think it was, something that would be that valuable, but I was like, everything else has been amazing. So I signed up, and then it just blew me away.
And what about boot camp blew you away?
Like, it started off slow. Like, I'm learning these ranges and I'm not even understanding what you're talking about. And then all of a sudden, as I start to understand what we're doing with the 3 bets, the 4 bets, and all of a sudden it just kind of hit me. And I was like, oh my God, how do I not know this stuff? This is amazing. The more I studied them, I started to understand why they were constructed sometimes. Like, I'd be like, that's why that's like that. And that would lead to more revelations and just a better understanding of poker in general.
Do you have any interesting takeaways from your bootcamp experience?
The most interesting thing about the boot camp, it's a pre-flop boot camp, but I feel like it's done as much for my post game as it did for my pre-game, just because I'm not in as many awkward and bad situations as I found myself in. When we were doing coaching before the boot camp, we couldn't get through 10, 15 minutes of tape without finding mistake after mistake. And then once we did the boot camp, it solved problems on the back end as well.
I know you've studied for 1,000 hours this year. How do you think boot camp compares to your other poker study?
Oh, it's crazy. The boot camp is probably the most important thing I've done all year out of everything. I would give anything to go back and to know that stuff 10 years ago. I can't imagine how successful I'd be right now if I had known that stuff. And I thought the boot camp was so valuable that I literally insisted you take more money from me and paid you more for the boot camp because I was blown away. I just thought the price was too cheap. And it's changed my game in ways that I can't even explain to you.
If you'd like to join the next round of Pre-Flop Bootcamp, which starts on the last Saturday of every month, head to chasingpokergreatness.com/bootcamp to lock up your spot. One more time, that's chasingpokergreatness.com/bootcamp. Tell me, so you go through all of this, like at the end, didn't sink it, like has it sunk in now, and how do you feel like looking back and reflecting on this experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty incredible experience, especially as being a professional poker player for the last, I mean, for sure last 11 years, but probably 15 years, I would say, playing in high school and all of that, because I was definitely trying hard to win then and learning and studying then. So it's pretty an amazing feeling. Even like looking back at it now, I can appreciate it. And it's nice to get the recognition too. Like I go play a cash game and when I don't get a bunch of congratulation texts, and like my phone was blowing up for that night and then the following day, because cash games don't really get and rightfully so, they don't get the recognition that
Well, they don't get the prestige.
Right, exactly. So yeah, nobody knows when you win or lose in a cash game. So
yeah. Successful poker player for 15 years straight. Nobody cares, win a tournament, and now everybody's like, wow, look at you. Finally found success. You finally made it, Mike. Right. Well done.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like I'm very appreciative and like humbled by it. But at the same time, I'm like, you know, I don't even know how to put this into words. Like, it's like I appreciate the recognition, but I also understand how kind of silly it is at the same time, because you can be a really good tournament player. Like, I'm not knocking tournament players or whatever, because I enjoy playing tournaments, you know, occasionally and all that. But it's like the variance, and just like, because like if I just get third or fourth, like, does anybody say anything? Like, do I get like a bunch of like congratulations or whatever, or like walking down the hallway saying congrats? Like, nobody's congratulating me if I get third, you know, or if I just lose the heads up match. Even then, like, there's not many people are going to be like, oh yeah, you know, congrats, because like if you don't win,
it's like Ricky Bobby says, if you're not first, you're last.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I think like as long-term professional poker players, we kind of see the ludicrous nature of it, and it is a little bit ludicrous. But at least in my defense with Chasing Poker Greatness, right? I'm pretty sure you were scheduled before you won. I know you were scheduled before you won the tournament. Correct. And I think you had to reschedule at somewhere in the middle of that tournament.
Yes, that is correct.
Because I went to like cardplayer.com and it was like, Mike Noori wins WSOP Bracelet. I was like, oh shit, now I see. Right. I see why he rescheduled now. That's
well, because they were all 10 a.m. restarts every day. And normally the restarts for the 3 p.m. events are 2 p.m. And so I'm never usually playing before 2 p.m. So I was like, okay, yeah, I can go schedule. Like, I scheduled this out, you know, a couple weeks ahead of time. And then, you know, but so I normally don't play these events that restart at 10 a.m. either.
So it was fate. It was fated.
Exactly.
Well, congratulations, man.
Thank you.
It's an exciting experience, and whether high variance or not, whether, you know, it ever happens again, which, I mean, I think you and I are both realists that like these things, they're tough to happen one time. So savor
I'm very fortunate that it happened one time for me, because I could have gone my whole career without winning one. And the next 6 or 7 tournaments I've played since I won, I've been basically out right away.
Get out of here. You can't do well in another one this series. Right. I mean, you can make it heads up 5 times in a row and lose every single time. I mean, like, that's just the nature.
Right. Exactly.
It's a tough world. I have immense respect for tournament grinders, just because it's a tough existence. Like,
I don't know how they can make a living doing that year in and year out. It doesn't, I can't conceptualize that people can, or would want to, because the amount of hours that you have to put in for that, I don't know. It doesn't compute with me that like people can make a living playing just tournaments. I know that I'm not knocking that it doesn't exist. I'm definitely agreeing that exists, but it seems really hard and really stressful to me that somebody would want to go down that path.
Yeah, a good friend of mine who actually came on the podcast, Joe DeSimone, he was a cash game grinder forever. He switched tournaments over the last like 3 or 4 years. I told him pretty sheepishly, like, I've never had a day where I just fired up tournaments online. Like, not one day ever in 17 years of playing poker professionally have I just had like, oh, this is an MTT day, I'm going to fire up MTTs and play these all day. And he hadn't either until he dove into the MTT world, and basically he's pretty hooked. I mean, he's convinced that like with high volume MTTs, you over the course of years, you can have a better yearly earn than cash games. The variance
Online,
is obscene.
Right. Online, for sure. I was talking more about in the live realm.
The live realm, I can't even
Right.
fathom that. That's like, I mean, he's like grinding, 10, 15 tables at a time. Like,
right. Way different situation. I was strictly talking about live with travel expenses. Like, it's a great way to see the world. Like, if the world was back to normal and I could go and, travel to a stop and happen to play a tournament there, but then really be for vacation, but have an excuse for me to go see somewhere else and get me out of my comfort zone, I would say that's an added bonus, but I wouldn't be going to just play poker if I were to travel and go to like back when, like if the world's back to normal, like being able to like go to EPTs and like do the stuff that I haven't done in the past would be kind of nice, because I just haven't done that ever.
Yeah, I think for the listener, if any listener out there has intents on being like a live MTT tournament grinder, it's exceptionally difficult, and you most likely need to learn how to play cash to supplement and make hourly rate when you're busted out of your tournaments, like travel, living expenses, all that stuff, not like food. It's very hard to overcome. Like, you need to be playing pretty big to have an ROI that justifies, plane ticket, hotel costs, all this stuff.
And guys that you see doing that are most of the time absolutely buried in makeup, is the hard truth of it. They're not, covering their tournament buy-ins, or they're either selling at, a markup to be able to free roll and, skate by. So those are two of the things that, like, it might look on the outside like they're doing really well, but you don't really know what the true situation is.
Sure. And I mean, if you're going to do it, you should probably just live in Vegas. I mean, you
right. I mean,
you need to live.
You can play in a tournament series every day of the year almost, and you could play some sort of 300 plus buy-in every day, but I'll take the 2.5 no limit grinder, has a better yearly return than 500 average buy-in tournament player.
I take that as well. I'm just saying, if you want to give it a go, you got to live near a place where you can get in action in MTTs like pretty much on a daily basis, and you've got to get your ass in the seat and grind and grind and grind and grind. It's very difficult.
Yes, I agree completely with that. Look, I started playing when I was 18 years old. I would fire up tournaments on Sunday, and I would just play a full slate of tournament schedule on Sundays, and that would be my tournament days. And then occasionally I would play tournaments like in the evenings or whatever, but most of the time I was grinding either sit and goes, or I was playing 3-6 limit 08, 25 cent, 50 cent PLO. Like, those were the things that were funding my tournament buy-ins. So I was using cash games to try and bank a big score from tournaments, because tournaments do give you that leverage where you can have a windfall, and then that changes what your day-to-day life looks like.
Absolutely.
But it's hard to have that and then, be able to rein it in, like, oh, well, I can just go jump from 2.5 to 25.50, on like a, I don't know, 200K score or something like that. So you got to be able to, keep it in perspective too. It is nice to be able to have that and then have that security as like a poker player, but you need to, be able to check yourself and have an ego. Like, you can't be like, I just won a tournament, I'm the best player in the world. Like, you hear a ton of interviews where people are like, I'm the best in the world now. I mean, it's like, no, you just won a fucking tournament. Who cares? Like, I know to put it, bluntly, but it's like,
I mean,
yeah.
The reality is, like, as a professional poker player, you have to manage your risk, and this manifests in multiple ways. And like, when you do get that windfall, it does give you the it makes you able to play bigger stakes than you normally play. So let's say you typically play 2-5, you can now play 10-20 NL, right?
Right.
You can probably play 25-50 NL technically with 200K, but we don't know. You don't know whether your skill level merits that jump yet, and so like, take it one step at a time. I mean, 40 buy-ins, live poker. I don't even know where 25-50 live poker even spreads on a regular basis. Like, maybe in Vegas and Bellagio, but not a ton of places.
Right. Bellagio has like 50, 100, no limit right now. And it's basically 10-20. And then there's in the high stakes scene, it's like basically like there's just massive jumps. So it's like you either play, and then there's also politics too within all of those games.
Sure.
Also, so even if, you had the bankroll to even play it, maybe you get in, maybe you don't. Like, it depends on who you know and like a bunch of other factors. But yeah, so
just test yourself. Right?
Exactly.
Like, just play, get some results, get some data, think about it, internalize, recalibrate, and figure it out from there. Like, maybe you can move up to that sig. Maybe you're skillful enough to do so. Maybe the variance is such that it's not as big of a risk, but at least do the calculations. Think about it. Don't go to like Texas and buy in for 100K and they're like 10, 20, 40, 80, 160 straddle game, right? Like, just be smart. I think is just a major takeaway. Like, think about the risk, analyze the risk, and try not to check your ego. Which, again, fundamentally, you went from playing high stakes cash mixed game, you win a tournament. You are not a significantly better player at the end of the week. Exactly. You are the same exact player that you were when you bought into the tournament, pretty much, right?
Right. I mean, I'm doing the same thing that I was doing before I won the tournament. Like, it's nice to have the money, but it's not changing what I'm doing on a daily basis or what I'm playing really. Like, yeah, like, I'm more comfortable and like I can withstand more variance and and if I was, selling pieces or whatever to like certain higher stakes games, like, I can sell less now if I wanted to, or I could just do the exact same thing that I was doing beforehand. It doesn't, like, it's not going to change my day-to-day outlook as a professional poker player.
Yeah. And I think that's a very smart, intelligent way to go about it. Now let's segue into some lightning round questions here for the round 2. What would you consider a weakness that you've had related to your poker game, and what steps have you taken to overcome said weakness?
I think my weakness is definitely now is studying, and I've kind of put more concentration in on, reviewing math spots and just kind of brushing up more and being sharper in that facet of the game, because I've kind of, as I play more, I've been kind of more comfortable in certain spots. But having that brush up and having that, checking up and making sure that I'm doing, the correct thing, even if I think I know what the correct thing is, to be checking up on that, math and like in certain like 1v1 draw spots, or even in no limit tournaments. Like I said, like I hadn't really brushed up on like push fold charts and what you should be calling and shoving with certain blinds and then calling with based on how many blinds they're shoving from, what position they're shoving from, stuff like that. So just kind of being sharper on more of the mathematics, I guess, and fundamentals.
Yeah. And I mean, it's easy to poker's more fun to play than to study typically. And so like it's easy to just fall in this habit of getting in there, battling, and then not thinking about poker because you just played it for like 12 to 14 hours.
Right.
Easy to fall out of the habit. What's a poker related thing that folks rave about that hasn't worked for you? Like a performance enhancing type of activity tool.
I would say like some of the, I mean, I don't really play in these type of, or I don't really need this, but like using like Pio and Munker and all these, GTO solvers, I've dabbled a little bit in them, but I don't really see, especially when you're playing tournaments, doing something, in my opinion, that's GTO or like that's balanced. You don't need to be balanced against these guys. Like most of these people don't even know, that or paying attention to like for you to be even balanced or no. So like you can almost basically turn your cards face up and they still wouldn't know what you have. So it's like being able to differentiate, because like I cannot compete against those high rollers and those high roller no limit hold'em events. I have no qualms in saying I am out of my league in that. Like I just haven't put any time and effort into that. But there's a lot of people that are using Pio and all of these new tools that I'm just like, I would rather use like my knowledge and my base and like pay attention to what other people are doing and figuring out how to exploit that than trying to be balanced in a spot that you don't really need to be balanced in.
Yeah, I mean, I go on about Pio every conversation, me and Pio. Again, it's a powerful tool, but it's a calculator that requires inputs and incomplete data and incomplete information. And if you were to input exact data points on the players that you're playing against, Pio would suggest to take an exploitative path, or what's viewed outside as an exploitative path. And I mean, we're playing poker against human beings. We're not playing poker against computers or solvers. And that's a good thing. And it means that like human beings are exploitable. They make strategic mistakes, and we ought to be using our heads and using those data points in order to guide our decision making. And to just trust a map that doesn't take any of that into consideration, I think is a big mistake in a lot of cases when you're playing poker.
Right. I agree with that for sure.
What's a common assumption people make about their poker careers you think they should spend some more time thinking about?
I think the results that you have in the short term, I think people put way too much weight on, where you need a longer outlook and being able to be objective through the short term and not let yourself get too wrapped up in any one thing, whether it's winning or losing.
What's a better path, you think, than a results-driven path?
I think it's like a introspective and being able to reflect on, taking notes in a session and like being able to objectively go over hands and having people that you trust to give you an objective opinion and not, blow smoke up your ass or whatever, like, is so critical, because them giving you that feedback and you guys and you discussing, oh, well, I was thinking this, and then they're like, oh, I didn't think about this. And then, and vice versa. Like, I didn't think about this, and like, I didn't realize that this was going on in the situation. And, I could have played this slightly different. And that's kind of what I think on that. It's like, yeah.
In TV shows and movies, I'm not a detective, and I don't actually know the protocol for police in the United States. But I know that in TV shows, at least, if you're connected or close to a crime, like you're related to the victim, you're not allowed to be on the case, right? Because you have emotional bias that interferes with objective decision making. And when you are the one who's analyzing your own plays, it's very easy to be emotionally biased based on the actions that you took. It's hard to see your blind spots. And so it's very important to have those outside sources that can give you clarity on things that you will never see.
Right. And I reflect on that early in my poker career. Like, it was just me. Like, a lot of these people that came up in the early 2000s to late 2000s, they were working with a group of people that were all trying to be really good. So you look at all like the top players, they were all studying, working together, learning new things. Like someone like me, I was figuring it out on my own. I didn't really know anybody that, I respected and trust and felt like, could help me at that time. And it wasn't until later that I found people that, had similar drive and ambition as I did. And then to be able to work with them and be able to talk about different situations. And, I'm talking with different people about different things. Like, some people are stronger in no limit tournaments. Some people are stronger in draw games for cash games, or some people are, for big bet, but then we play big bet with the cap, and that changes a lot of, I can go on and on with that type of stuff.
Yeah. So it's ultra important. And, I'm working on a project right now that I'm calling CPG Wolves. It's going to be a coaching for profit operation. And it's the same concept in mind, right? Getting a group of guys together, me coaching, and then them collectively learning and growing together as a unit. Sharing replays of coaching sessions, studying those replays, having weekly group meetings, discussing poker, learning, growing together. It's just the best way to improve. It's just the best way to get as good as you can at poker as quickly as you can. There's no alternative to that. And so, challenge the listener to plug in somewhere to some community, because your bankroll, your future self will just thank you immensely.
Yeah. Poker's not like a team sport, but it's a team sport off the felt.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course. Iron sharpens iron, and you need people to bounce ideas off of, to challenge you, to investigate your emotional biases, to investigate assumptions, to challenge assumptions, to see your blind spots. You need this because human beings, it's a struggle, man. We're not wired to be professional poker players biologically. So we need these outside sources to help us navigate. Have you made any purchases in the past year that have been impactful to either your poker game or your life?
Major purchases? No. I would say no.
Any minor purchases? Just something that you're like, wow, this was a good thing.
I mean, I'm renting a condo in Vegas right now that, has like, so I have two now bases. So I have Los Angeles and Vegas now. So it's nice sleeping in like my own bed here instead of like either staying at a friend's or hotel hopping or whatever. It's kind of nice to have my own spot here, I guess, would be the only kind of significant purchase, but it's not like really a long-term thing. So, well,
makes your life better for now. So I guess
it makes it easier. And, there's, gym and amenities here. And so I don't have it's more of like a home base now than it would be like, just like coming here for like a week and playing cash games and then going home or whatever.
Yeah. Have you ever strongly believed something in your poker career only to change your mind? And what led to that change?
All the time. I don't think there's one specific example, but I'm constantly wrong. Like, and that's okay. And I think it's more important that I realize that I'm constantly wrong, or even somebody saying, like, making some comment at the table that, like, I played a hand a certain way, or even if I'm not in the hand, somebody saying something about somebody else, and then thinking about that and being able to reflect on that and be like, why are they saying that? Or why should I be doing something different than what I was doing in a certain spot?
Or if it's like, even if it's off point, you still gain an insight into how people think, which can be helpful in the future, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, I'm wrong more than I'm right in life and in poker, and I think that, like, the more I learn, the less I realize that I know, and that's just the reality of a life experience, navigating the poker world. Like, you're just very often wrong, and that's okay. You have to be able to accept that. You have to be able to say, I don't know. If you don't know an answer to a question, just say, I don't know. There's nothing that, like, if somebody in the poker world pretends to have all the answers, they're lying. They don't, or they're delusional.
Right. It's smoke and mirrors. Right.
Nobody's got all the answers. We're all learning. We're all growing.
And the answers are changing too. The
answers change for sure.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, as Eric Seidel says, less certainty, more inquiry. He says that so much better than I do. Just very compact 4 words. You working on any projects that are near and dear to your heart?
Poker wise?
Life wise, poker wise?
At the moment, no, I'm doing some sports betting stuff, models wise, and that side of my life that I'm working on, which is taking up a decent part of my time, but not anything. I mean, it's kind of taken a back burner while I basically dedicated these 2 months to poker, and I'm in poker mode, but sports betting is, near and dear to my heart, and I find it very fascinating, and the answers there are more black and white. And even though there's a lot of variance within that, but it feels like, even though I have no control over the outcome, it still feels like I have some control, if that makes sense.
Talk about a world that is driven and invaded by emotional biases, the sporting world. Just betting on sports, rooting on your favorite team, so many biases.
Many. Right.
Cheering for the guys that wear the jersey that you prefer. It's crazy.
Right. God. Taking out all of that stuff and being very objective on it, and then having, the results be whatever the results are, is very humbling. I think it's also made me a better poker player because, it makes you realize, you can put in all the hard work and you can come to the right answer and it still doesn't work out. Now, over the long term, it should work out just like poker, but you're constantly battling that, and it's way easier to tilt. Like, you can just fire in something because you feel like that's what you should do on that day and not trust your process. So if anything, it's made me realize that, like, you need to trust your process and you need to stick to that. And if you need to retool your process, that's okay too.
Sure. I mean,
but just going out there and firing whatever because you feel like that's what you want to do, or you tilt or whatever, like, there's for sure tilting in sports betting.
Oh, I mean, it's almost inevitable, right? Like, again, you're playing for the long term, but the short term feels very real. And sometimes it's hard to see the long term when you're in the midst of the short term.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, with that, we'll wrap up. And
Excellent.
final question, where can the Chasing Poker Greatness, if they want to learn more about you, find you on the World Wide Web?
Twitter is probably the best if you want to message me. I'm not really that big of social media. I don't really have that big of a social media presence, but if anybody wants to contact me or, pick my brain on anything, I'm happy to help. And you can reach me at Twitter at Mike Noori. So
Awesome.
that is the best spot to reach me. And thanks, Brad, for having me on again. And it was fun talking to you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Congratulations again. And best of luck for the rest of the series. Get in there, give it hell. Yeah. And we'll catch up.
Hopefully win another one.
Win another one. We'll catch up sooner or later, man. Take care. Best of luck.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening to Chasing Poker Greatness. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com to get the newsletter, join the Greatness Village community, book a coaching session, or dive into the latest data-driven poker courses. Follow the show on Twitter at CPG Podcast.